Language is a very powerful tool. We can express our ideas, thoughts, and we can communicate our mind through language. Even though language is a powerful tool, it has its own limits. Language can only express what we have already experienced. It cannot explain what we have not already experienced. For example, I can say the sugar is very sweet, but if someone has not experienced sweetness or sugar, how can they understand it? So language can only explain what we have already experienced, and we in normal life experience only the dualities, which implies that language can express only the dualities. It cannot explain what is beyond the mind and the intellect. Language can explain what we experience through the five sense organs. It cannot explain that which is beyond the mind and intellect or the sense organs. It cannot explain the non-dual principle or about Brahman. It is beyond the mind and intellect. In what else way can the non-dual principle be explained? Only the deep indrawn silence can explain Brahman. But we cannot understand that deep indrawn silence. Only the highly elevated souls or the rishis can understand it. So how are we going to understand about Brahman? All cannot go into meditation and understand it. And moreover, Vedanta is a path of realization through knowledge. So we need scriptures and a guru to understand it. So how can they explain this non-dual principle without language? They use only language. But language has its limits. They explain up to that limit. We can climb on the ladder of spirituality up to the limit. After that, we have to realize our own. Language can explain only the object, but the reality is the subject. It can explain the subject in the way how it explains the object, which is, it can explain what it is. Language can explain what it is or what it is not. Definitely, language cannot explain what it is. It can say that Brahman or Atma is the self, but we have to realize the self. Language cannot penetrate into the self and explain how it is. It can say that it is our self. Language can say what it is not. Language can explain about the anatma, and language can very clearly say that Atma is not anatma. Language is a very good pointer to show the path towards the reality. As a pointer, language uses many techniques, and among them, 3 of them are very famous. And one among them is the Neti technique of the Upanishads. Neti means not this. So not this technique. The first Neti implies that it does not mean that Brahman does not exist. Brahman exists. And the second Neti implies that Brahman is not an object. It is the subject. We have to know about that by realizing the self. So this is the Neti technique of the Upanishads. Another technique is the language uses is the lakshana, that is the characteristics. Language cannot explain the reality directly, so it takes a roundabout method. It says that Brahman is that on which this unreal world is superimposed. So it uses the unreal world as a pointer to point the reality. So this is one technique the scriptures use or the language uses to explain Brahman. And another one technique is the using the paradoxical statements. Paradoxical statements are mostly used to clear doubts or the clear errors in understanding the reality. Let me explain few of the paradoxical statements. In Bhagavad Gita says that seeing action in inaction and seeing inaction in action, which implies that Atma is actionless, but due to his misidentification, we believe that Atma is performing action. So this statement clears the doubt about Atma and Anatma. And another paradoxical statement is Brahman is different from what all we know and is different from the unknown too, which implies that we have yet to know about Brahman, and Brahman is not as object, it is the subject. Another paradoxical statement is those who say I know Brahman does not know Brahman, and those who say I do not know Brahman knows Brahman, which implies that Brahman is not the object, it is the subject. We know only about the object. That's why those who say I know Brahman does not know Brahman. This statement implies that Brahman is the subject. And another paradoxical statement is Brahman is smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. And which implies that Brahman is not small or not big, it is infinite. We cannot assume a form for it. This is very important because some people, they imagine Brahman has a form. So these are few of the paradoxical statements taken from the scriptures, Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. There are many more paradoxical statements like this. So this is one way used by the language to explain the non-dual principle, that is Brahman. Up to a certain limit, language can help us understand ourselves, and the gurus can teach us. Up to a limit, we have to realize, we have to take their teachings and realize our own about ourselves. Language cannot penetrate beyond a limit. At the same time, the limitations of the language is never a barrier to realize the self. So this is about language and knowledge. Thank you for watching.